Hi, this is Honorable Mliswa. I'm here in Madare anotengesa majanja and vano majanja ndovakawanda but futika 40,000 loan kandaipa kaka ndamtoipawo community ndakutengawo majanja kakuti wawanewo saka ine maripo effects aku economy 40,000 takatitisa wani tikasawana 40,000 kwa madara aya vanoiwana kuti marikuda tipinde 40,000 ende ipension yangu futi iloni yandinotora loan kana usingada usatore vamwe vanhu vakapiwa maloni nguva yamugabe vauda kurambidza vamwe azviite pamberi nema40,000 loan kuti market isimudzire tipe madhara amarikutaura ndozve maona ndeyazvitenga majanja munoti tiine ma40,000 loan aatikupiwa isusu ma-MP zvakashatika zvakanaka
ndapasina kupindira kwaishe echokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika.
Thank you very much, members of the 4th Estate. A very good morning to you and convivial greetings, fellow Zimbabweans, Africans, and citizens of the world. Welcome to the press brief from the Citizens Coalition for Change caucus in Parliament. You know that after the assault to the authentic opposition and the democratic forces in this country last year, it became inevitable and natural that we gave birth in January to a new political baby in the politics of our country, the Citizens Coalition for Change, stewarded by our champion-in-chief, Advocate Nelson Chamisa. The intention and central objective of the Citizens Coalition for Change is to attain political power in our country and govern differently, and more importantly, to change the concrete lives of our people. This announcement of our entry into the politics of our country led to our participation in the by-elections that happened in this country, and you know that we emerged victorious statistically with 60% of the vote share of Parliament, and of course the majority again in local council. Therefore, in the recent days, you know that there has been a debate in the court of public opinion around the role of our members of Parliament. Given the discourse that has been happening around the loans that are given to our members of Parliament, we as the Citizens Coalition for Change met with the Parliamentary caucus, and they have, as per the mandate, to clarify and speak to the people of Zimbabwe, because the thrust and philosophy of our movement is putting the citizens back at the center of our politics. And therefore, when citizens raise concerns, we are duty-bound morally and politically to answer to the questions that are raised by ordinary people, because to us, those are at the center of the national democratic project and the national democratic struggle, which we are prosecuting without fear or favor. Therefore, I will invite to the podium our Chief Whip of CCC, Honorable Mtsame, to address the people of Zimbabwe and the media. And then after that aspect, tradition and protocol, I'll take questions so that we clarify. Honorable Chair.
Thank you, everyone. A very warm greetings to you all, members of the 4th State. Everyone is very much welcome. The honorable members of the CCC party who are here, you are welcome, and we thank you so much for your presence, regardless of the shortest notice. The first and foremost, I would like to give so much respect to the 4th State for the party that you are playing in terms of disseminating information to the world. Honorable members of the 4th State, on Tuesday, the 6th of this December 2022, the Citizens Coalition for Change Parliamentary Caucus converged in Harare, where, among other things, they discussed critical national issues affecting the citizens of Zimbabwe. Chief among these were the deteriorating situation of our economy, the 2023 national budget, the power shortages in the country, and the plethora of vicious legislation proposed by the ZANU-PF party. We also discussed the much publicized the US $40,000 loan granted to members of parliament. The CCC caucus has always put the citizens at the forefront in the quest to push for democratic change in Zimbabwe. At all material times, it has advanced in the agenda of citizen protection and that of holding the executive to account. Thus stood constantly on platform that has placed citizens at the center of its mandate. We acknowledge that the citizens has right to question and to oversee conduct, omissions, commissions of those that it elects into public office. In this regard, we therefore welcome the intense public scrutiny around this issue. Critical to the situation we find ourselves in is the important question of the role of Parliament. Parliament plays a critical role of making laws for the good order of Zimbabwe. However, as the third arm of the state, its most important function is that of holding the executive to account and, more importantly, demanding accountability over the use of Zimbabwe's resources. Despite this important role, the executive has over decades systematically debased and weakened the role of Parliament. Parliament has been underfunded and Parliament has been treated as a constitutional inconvenience by an executive that is not accountable and is not prepared to be held to account. Whilst Parliament as an institution has been incapacitated through underfunding, the whipping system, and the constant recalls of the Member of Parliament, herself has been incapacitated and devalued by failure to put into place terms and conditions that allow her to properly execute her duties. In other countries, the MP is capacitated by the provision of a constituents office, research assistants, research budgets, computers, a decent income, and other accessories that enable her to execute her job. Sadly, that is not the case in our country, motherland Zimbabwe. In a proper economy, MPs should decently be remunerated to enable them to carry out the important task of representing the citizens that they are privileged to serve. Sadly, in Zimbabwe, that is not the case. On average, up until September 2019, the average salary of an MP has been reduced to the equivalence of about USD $60 per month. The de-dollarization exercise carried out by the government in February 2019 through SI Instrument 33 of 2019 seriously eroded the salary of every public worker, including the MPs and all other civil servants in this country. In September of 2019, during the debate of the supplementary budget, MPs managed to extract some increase to all public workers in Zimbabwe. The most significant was the raising of the tax threshold to 900,000 from 300,000. The answered reports will show massive amounts of money being pushed to the votes of health and to education pursuant to pressure from the members of Parliament. It was at this point that the executive conceded to increasing MP salaries to Zimbabwean plus or minus 200,000 RTGS, which is almost the equivalent of USD 200. The new salary remains very below the poverty datum line by a long margin. It also remains way below the average regional salary of MPs, which is to a region of US plus 2,000, even in economies that are smaller than Zimbabwe, or countries such as Kenya and others where MPs are paid around USD 13,000 a month. This is in addition to the provision of constituent offices and paid research assistances. The position of MPs in particular remains particularly vulnerable, given they do not own means of production to derive and have income. They face the onslaught of well-resourced opponents which had access to state resources that include command agriculture, Mvudza, the mines farms, the tenders, and other senders of loot. But despite this, they have remained constant in providing community support in the form of school fees, funeral assistance, and other social challenges of failure created by the crisis of leadership in Zimbabwe. One of the key issues that came up for debate in September was that of housing. Most MPs reside out Harare and are ordinarily housed in hotels. In the preceding months, as of now, Parliament had failed to pay these hotels, resulting in embarrassing situations for MPs, forced to hop from one hotel to another, and others moving to lodges and to other places for accommodation. It was in this context that a housing facility was raised. Indeed, over the years, different facilities and loans have always been provided for Parliament. The most common of these loans have been vehicle loans of up to 60,000, in some cases 55,000, 50,000, depending on the portfolio that the honorable member holds. The loans have always been repaid. Where there has been a default, Parliament has instituted legal proceedings and court records are public. In some cases, vehicles have been seized at toll gates, like for Honorable Wende, Honorable Chinanjawana, Honorable Caston Mateo, and my vehicle at time, it was taken at toll gate as I got into Mashingo town. And some of these issues, they are still in court defending ourselves. The suggestions in some quarters that loans are donations is not correct. In the midterm supplemental budget of September 2022, approved in September, provision was made for a housing vehicle loan of about USD 40,000. The loan was understood as genuine part of the MP's welfare. The loan is therefore not a surprise executive instrument, but one that went through the due process of appropriation as is provided in our constitution of our country. It is not a discretionary issue or an executive gratuitous gesture, unlike grants granted to ministers and deputy ministers. The loan is not new and it's not a new one. In October of 22, MPs were made to sign binding loan application forms, which they executed. In late November, Parliament made partial disbursements of these loans. The loan in question is above board. The loan is is no excuse for state failure or the deplorable state of public service. It is no excuse for 42 years of mean management and misallocation of public resources. And most certainly, the loan cannot bribe or derail a cause that is for us. We therefore reject the equalization. We are not ZANU, and they have never been ZANU, and I have never been ZANU, and we will never be ZANU-PF. We are Triple C. We have remained principled and committed. We have remained unwavering in our quest for transformation and change in our country. We have faced dictatorship and its billions of dollars weaponized against our people. We refuse to be sidetracked or seduced into agendas that have ulterior motives. We believe in our leader, the advocate, Nelson Chamisa. We have no doubt there will be change in our country, and we will stand forthright through thick, through the storm, through hell, through everything, will stand behind the champion-in-chief, Advocate Nelson Chamisa. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to members of the Fourth State. Thank you very much to honorable members. I'll now give the platform to our spokesperson, the deputy, Papa Ostalicious Siziva. If you can take the platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Chief Whip of Parliament. You can see that there is clarity of thought and fix-it of policy from CCC. We've had a communication problem, and as an alternative government, we take procedures. That's why we've been doing this engagement, members of Parliament, so that there's clarity of what transpired, because that has been the missing link in the discourse around the issue of the loans to Parliament. And thank you, our Chief Whip, for clarifying the position, and that our members of Parliament remains very clear in terms of the mandate. So we'll take a few questions and we'll share the statement with you so that you can be able to give reference. We'll take, as per the tradition, you introduce yourself, and then we take a few questions so that we can conclude the presser. Thank you. Yes, Comrade Leo.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chief Whip, for the clarification. I'm sure, or I hope, the citizens will understand. Your position now, Chief Whip, seems to be against what the President of CCC, President Nelson Chamisa, had said in a video which has been shared countless times on social media, where he said this was unethical and should not be done, and CCC MPs should not have signed those papers. This is what the CCC President said. It is on video. In this instance, you seem to be defending, if I'm not losing, you seem to be defending the move to get the 40,000. May you please give us a clarity? And you please just clarify whether you are not going against the President.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes.
Thank you so much, Spokes. I have two questions. My first question is, Chief, do you think the CCC President has become soft to the members of Parliament? And if the members of Parliament were told not to receive that 40K, were they going to listen to the CCC President? And my last question is, seeing that we are only a few months before the next general elections, if the MPs had collected the 40K, how then do they intend to pay that money? If it's a loan, how do they intend to pay back that money? If most of them, are not coming back in Parliament next election? Thank you.
Thank you, Mlondo.
Okay, my question to the Chief Whip will be, some of the critics have argued that is it not better than to take some of the funds and share this with your party, a certain percentage of the funds, or your citizens, so that at least there is some form of equality, given that some are arguing that it's up to your funds. Are we going to see some of the CCC MPs contributing to that, given your financial situation?
Okay, yes.
Just to add on to Molo's question, just a confirmation, are these personal loans, both the expectations from public for these loans to be used in certain ways, maybe in terms of development of service delivery? Are these personal loans, or this money that can be used for
Okay. So I think those are all the questions.
Thank you. I'll go on to the third question. This is a loan, and that loan is an agreement, which is clearly a loan agreement, which is clearly spelled out at how it's supposed to be spent. And any deviation from that requirement would be a flouting of rules. So we always abide by the requirements of this agreement. So we'll speak to the agreement to deliver in terms of how the 40,000 is supposed to be used. As if you take note, I had earlier on pronounced to the fourth state that it's for housing purposes. And that purpose is what it stands for. And an honorable member is supposed to take that responsibility to have access to a house, and it will save that. And as the CCC will make sure that our honorable members will stick to the requirements of the loan agreement. Then on the other two, I'll give that platform to the party. Remember, I'm not an independent chief whip. I belong to a political party. And on other matters, the party has to play a role. And that's why I'm here after all this outcry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Whip. I think there's clarity. Leo, you asked a question around the president speaking. You understand, Leo, that the president is a visionary. He has got a mandate at all material times, whether it is hot, it is cold, it is summer, to give vision and direction and to guide the organization in terms of his values and ethos. And we have said, we're meeting with members of parliament, and one of the critical issues we raise is the questions of integrity. That's why we took it upon ourselves as CCC to say, first thing, we must investigate. That's why we called the chief whip, we called all our members of parliament to say, you explain to us, to say what happened, right? Because we had to make sure that we investigate and make a decision based on the facts, which is what they've highlighted now and given a perspective to our people and supporters. And the president made it very, very clear that in no circumstances can our party dither and compromise on issues of ethics and values. The issue that we saw, and that's why we are happy today, because we have said, members of parliament, go and speak to the people, because we had no political problem. I see my fellow political science professor saying no, to try and strike political equivalence between our members of parliament and ZANU. We're far from it, because we have said to members of parliament, come and explain to us what transpired. And we now have the facts. We have read the contracts. And what was not there was a communication issue, not a political problem. But the enemy obviously intended to harvest out of it and present a political problem. One of it, you know it. One of it was the assumption and the narrative that CCC MPs have defied the president. You cannot separate the champion-in-chief and his deployees in parliament. It is impossible. You can't. There is an illusion within our enemy's camp to say, no, there's a discongestion. They met with the champion-in-chief, conveyed what happened, because what we wanted was to fill the lacuna of information around what transpired, because the court of the public opinion had not discourse in terms of the contents of the contract, which is what we got. Because if we had found out that, number one, there was a breach of our principles and values. For example, the discourse was that, no, we are being given as trinkets and trappings by the executive, which is not the fact. Because it is members of parliament, as they've articulated, we have heard them, that brought the debate to a supplementary budget. Not that it was something given at the mercy of the executive. That's fact number one. Right? Number two, there's an assumption, and I'm happy that members, we have said as CCC, which answers the question that is asked by Mlo. We are a citizens movement. we have met with members of parliament and said to them, look, this is a private loan. Ordinarily, just like they got the 60,000, we are not supposed to be calling them and questioning, but that's their private contracts and loans privately as members of parliament, right? But because there is an outcry and misunderstanding of the issue, that's why we wanted to investigate whether there is any element of criminality, any element that bastardizes our values. That's what we're interrogating. That's why they presented our case. And we can't say, there is a debate also by some people that no, President Chamisa demanded a certain percentage. Look, we have been prosecuting this struggle in difficult terrains. You know, they took our headquarters. They took our offices in our yesteryear movement, of course. They took our these members of parliament that they are trying to bastardize today are the same people they record from parliament on the basis of their allegiance to the cause for democracy in our country. Would have chosen the easier route to go and deal with dictatorship. You know that after election they said, no, come, President Chamisa will give you a motorcade, private security, and all the trappings of authoritarianism. We said, look, this is not provided for at law, so it can't come at the mercy of the winner. Let it be something that come out of the law, not that you want to hoodwink us and drag us into the trinkets. And I don't think that logically, as an organization, would say, no, give us, because they have to account. That's why we say, for us as a party, all the members of parliament, and that's a non-negotiable position, which emphasizes what the president talks about as a visionary, that every member of parliament that took the loan must pay back. Every person that took the money is a non-negotiable position. Because when we tell them, no, give us the money, they say, we can't pay back, right? We have to make sure that taxpayers' money is accounted for. There's a big debate in the politics of our country. Just right now, we're working on our policy response to the load shedding crisis. We have said to our opponents in ZANU, there is a problem in this country around electricity. We have proposed basically 3 things that must be done. Number 1, we have said to government of Mr. Nanga, let's deal with generation. The generation of electricity in Zimbabwe, which is the problem about the clueless regime that is leading us. We have said, number 1, let's build Batok so that we increase capacity generation to our country. Number 2, we have said, let's build small hydroelectricity power stations in places like Manicaland and let's harvest wind energy. Let's build solar energies. But that discourse to them, to analog people, it's a discourse that they can't appreciate. Number 2, we said, let's deal with transmission. We lose 30% of electricity because of archaic transmission cables. We have said, let's resolve the transmission issue in Zimbabwe so that we don't have the current load shedding. Number 3, of course, demand side management, right? Let's have prepaid meters in farms and so forth. A lot of people then don't pay. So these are issues that we are tabling. And to the people of Zimbabwe, we think these are more important national issues that we must be discussing to say, how do we rescue Zimbabwe from the current crisis? Because we can't industrialize without electricity. Not the discourse that, no, we are going to shut. We have proposed that let's have solar, let's have geysers in every person's household. It's a proposal that we put in our blueprint on how we want to transform our country. And of course, the last issue is development and urbanization of rural areas. Let's electrify rural areas. It's possible. We have proposed these issues, and we think that's an important national discourse and a conversation that must happen. I think that I've answered. There's a question around CCC being soft, the president being soft. I think we are the toughest political organization to our deployees because we have managed as Citizens Coalition for Change to relegate the self for the advancement of the collective. That has been our basic philosophy since we entered the democratic politics in our country. It's about relegating the self and adopting the collective. That's why we are standing tall. And I don't think that to anyone in the opponent's camp who think that you can hoodwink and cajole our members of parliament through trappings, I think that it would be a mistake for those that strategically think that's the issue. Because we have resisted different temptations to join the gravy train because we have remained true to the values of democracy and fight for freedom in our country. And our values remain values of justice, freedom, and solidarity. That's why we've said, let's respond to the people so that people understand that the democratic train is in trail. Our members of parliament are clear in terms of the purpose. In actual fact, there will be a debate. You go to parliament, you will see more vigor and vitality from our members of parliament in terms of questioning power and making sure that they do their constitutional duty of making sure they do executive oversight. Members of the fourth estate, fellow Zimbabweans, Africans, thank you very much for coming to our press conference. Okay, there's a burning question, Leo.
Okay, I think, thank you so much for this and giving us time to engage, to get to understand what is happening in Parliament and outside. Now, I think the fear or the worry has been or is within the public, online and offline. Parliament has in the past forwarded loans, be it to MPs, cabinet ministers, or top ZANU-PF officials in the past. You will remember the farm mechanization program and how it went about. And as a result, we have seen people or those who benefited openly declaring that they are not going to pay back that which was forwarded to them. Now, what guarantee should the people have that these loans will be paid back other than what we are doing?
Thank you. Your point emphasizes the animal farm politics in our country. You will never hear that from the democratic forces, because at the present moment, the honorable member was referring to some of our members whose automobiles were taken in toll gates, people going back to court. You only hear that from people who benefit from impunity, and most of them are from ZANU-PF. Because we know for a fact that some of them won't pay back. We have said as CCC, as our condition, that everyone who has taken must make sure that they fulfill the obligation as prescribed for by the law. It's an important conversation we've had and a binding resolution of the party, that everyone must make sure that they stick to what is in the contract. That's a decision. And anyone, and I can assure you that no member of parliament from our side will have difficulties. In fact, we have such kind of privilege that you are mentioning, that no, they'll go out and boast and say, no, we're not going to be paying back that man. It's the problem of animal farm kingdom politics in our country, which is the culture of impunity and a creeping sense of entitlement by ZANU that we can take from taxpayers' money and not pay back. It's one of the reasons why we're in politics, so that we change that. You get from the public, you pay back. You get from taxpayers' money, you pay. It's as simple as that. And we must make sure that there's a culture of accountability, which is what we represent. And up to this present moment, we have lived to all of our promises, we have lived all to our obligations. If that was not the case, I can tell you all these members of parliament will be imprisoned, because every day there's a department dedicated to look at any element of criminality from our champions in the Citizens Coalition for Change. And they have remained clear in terms of that particular aspect. But it reflects the challenge of our politics, that the other side has law in their side and abuse of the same. Thank you.
And then, sorry, is this the right time?
Right time to?
For parliaments to be dishing out loans to about 210 or plus?
We think that is not the right time for government to be giving such amounts of money to ministers when there is no drugs in hospitals. We think that that amount of money that is being given to other arms of government is lack of prioritization, because our people are dying of 16th century diseases. So we think that, and it's one of the issues that our members of parliament have been raising in parliament, to say, look, let us prioritize the interests of ordinary people. And that is our key focus. And we're not going to dither on that. Despite that they've said the welfare of our MPs must be addressed, we don't dither on the question of prioritization. That is the discourse that our members of parliament are bringing in parliament, and we salute them for that. I think that's the last question.
So there's a conception among general people, among citizens, that the CCC is becoming weaker ahead of the 2023 elections. And this is compounded by such issues, 40,000 issues. We have Honorable Sheldon when the issue where he's getting a backlash from colleagues, fellow citizens. So going ahead of the 23 elections, what's your take? Are you becoming weaker? We have seen so much going on around the past elections, and this is quite proving to be a weaker CCC going into election.
I think that an ordinary opposition movement that would have received such blows as us would not been existing. The intention about ZANU was to destroy the authentic opposition. We have remained home, we have remained standing. And I can assure you as I conclude that the launch of the Citizens Coalition for Change is going to answer that question. Not qualitative, because the debate you are raising is qualitative. But the launch of CCC and our home stretch campaign to 2020 elections answers decisively and quantitatively the question of who we are in the politics of our country. Thank you very much, members of the media, for having us. Thank you.